Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Dana Perino. Welcome to my home here in Bayhead, New Jersey. Come on in.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, I'm Dana Perino. I am an anchor and a co-host at Fox News for America's Newsroom from 9 to 11 in the morning, and then The 5 from 5 to 6 p.m. And I'm also on the election coverage team. Little podcast you might have heard of called Perino on Politics is something I do as well. I was the White House press secretary for President George W. Bush. I have had the opportunity to write several books, including one called I Wish Someone Had Told Me. That's a little gem of a book. And this is my home in Bayhead, New Jersey. One of the reasons I'm in Bayhead, New Jersey is because of a dear friend of mine, Lauren Fritz. Lauren Fritz worked at Fox News years ago, and she was assigned to help me kind of get my footing at Fox, and we became really good friends. She invited Peter and myself to come down with our dog, and we got to meet her family. They have a house here, and they've been coming here for years. And we became friends with them, almost like family. And then when we moved down here permanently, Barbara was a decorator for our house before this one and for this one. So I have to say, I probably am an interior designer's dream client. I outsource and I say yes. So Barbara Fritz has been able to say, this is what I think would be great. And she knows me, and she has never gotten it wrong. So the house is very comfortable. There's a lot of blues and greens and pinks to bring out some color. There's a lot of art, a lot of dog art. And then there's some special touches from my life, from Wyoming, the time at the White House, artwork that Peter and I have picked up along the way, and a lot of books. So working in the White House is a 24/7 job. And when I was there, we went from having pagers that we would use to contact each other on the weekends to having Blackberries. And now all of a sudden you could do email 24/7. And my husband would always want me to get off my phone for a while. And I would actually hide in the bathroom sometimes, answering emails to reporters so that he wouldn't get mad at me on Saturdays and Sundays. And over time, I became the deputy press secretary, and it was a great job. I loved being the deputy. I was deputy to Tony Snow and to Scott McClellan, but Tony Snow was the main person I worked for. And he let me do a lot of things. I always briefed President Bush on every press conference. I was there every Saturday and Sunday. I worked all the holidays and weekends. I went on all the trips. That was me. So getting towards the end of the administration, about 18 months left to go, maybe a little more, the chief of staff said, hey, if there's anybody on the team who doesn't think they can make it to the very end, say so now, because we need people with fresh legs. The president intends to finish his second term with a sprint to the finish. And I thought, I am barely crawling right now. I can't imagine what it's going to be like at the finish. So around that time, Peter was going to run a crazy race, like a 24-hour race with a relay team in Wisconsin. And I said, fine, I'll go. And on the trip there, we talked about this challenge from the chief of staff. And I said, you know, maybe because I'm not going to be the press secretary in the top job, it would be good to leave now. And I can get established. You know, I didn't come from money, so I needed to get a job right away. And I thought that was what I was going to do. Peter and I spend the weekend, and at the end of the weekend, that's our plan. I'm going to resign from the White House. Now, I didn't really want to leave the White House, but I felt like if I was being practical, this was the right time. So I go into the White House on the Monday morning, and I had a communications meeting, and I saw Ed Gillespie, the counselor to the president in charge of communications, and I said, hey, Ed, can I see you after the meeting? He says, oh, yes, I need to talk to you too. Perfect. We have the meeting. He dismisses everyone and says, Dana, can you stay? Sure. Everybody leaves, and we sit down, and I'm so nervous. I'm just about to blurt out that I'm going to resign from the White House. And he said, do you mind if I go first? And I said, okay, sure. And I sat back, And he said, the president would like to announce you as the new press secretary on Friday. And I said, great. And inside, immediately, I knew my life had changed dramatically. First of all, Tony Snow, who was the press secretary, was suffering from cancer and needed to take care of his health in order to spend some time with his family and get better. And the job was just entirely too much for somebody who was needing to focus on his health. Secondly, I knew that it was an opportunity that the first Republican woman would ever have had. So I was about to make some history. And I also knew that if I didn't totally screw it up, it would open doors to me for a career that I could have never imagined when I was a kid growing up in Wyoming. This is something that I call the morning room, though you can be in here anytime. When we bought the house, these 4 white chairs were here, and I loved them, and we've kept them. But we added different pillows to, again, bring out that blue and white feel. We showcase a few things. Of course, this is our dog Percy as Winston Churchill, because who wouldn't want a little plate like this? We also have here, just as a chance to highlight a few accomplishments, but these are the 4 books I've written. And so we just keep them here as a good reminder that we're blessed and we have had great opportunity that we took advantage of. Do you want to see my most important valued objects? Here they are. President George W. Bush was not a painter during the White House years. He became a painter afterwards. And it's a wonderful story. And it turns out he's very, very good, like a savant. He's excellent. This is a painting he did of Percy, my puppy, when he was about 3 months old. And he signs it 43. And I'll never forget, he sent me a message and he said, "Are you sure this dog's eyes are blue?" I said, "Yes, sir." They are blue. They turn over time. And then I just have this here, painted by George W. Bush for Dana P. in November of 2021. And honestly, as I told Peter, you have to be Dolly Madison. If anything's happening in this house, if there's a fire, these are the things you get. I also had a chance to see him in March of 2021 when he did a portrait of immigrants book. And I went to interview him, and he surprised me with this bouquet and a technique that he's really worked on and developed. So this and that one, and then a painting that I have in New York of Jasper, my prized possessions. And let me bring you into the dining room. And this is a great place to gather. And I love, again, bringing the blues in. We have an indoor-outdoor rug, and part of the reason is we live on the beach. So people are coming in and out, and people are super respectful, but we do have a stone floor, and then, because of sand and the rain, sometimes mud, it's just easy to clean if you have the indoor-outdoor type of materials, which we have here. So this is the table. Let me first show you this. I mentioned that the Bush paintings are my prized possessions. I'm going to add this shell mirror. My friend Lauren Fritz, the decorator's daughter, she got all of these shells from the Bahamas and then made this for me as a gift. I absolutely adore it. I adore it. And then this was a special memory of Bill Hemmer and myself on set when Percy came into our lives. So Jasper, the America's dog, was very famous at Fox, and he died only at 9 years old. So getting Percy was quite a joy, and I just love how Bill Hemmer held him up like Simba. I also love these from Mark and Graham. You can get these coasters that are paper, but you can monogram them in any way. So they just say Bayhead, and that makes for a great way to protect your table. This is a vintage cabinet that Barbara Fritz found, and we just keep the odds and ends in here for cocktail napkins in case you need one of those. The table I love. These are from La Platera, and that's out of Madrid. That's one of our favorite places to travel, and it goes well with hydrangeas, which we have a lot of hydrangeas at the Jersey Shore. Blue and white are special colors, I know. the ones that grow around in my yard are hot pink. So when those come up, they're a fun thing to add to the table. We have the bamboo look for the silverware. And then this is a special light feature that we found that would just add a little bit of white still, but something that is a more of a kind of dramatic and eye-catching piece for the house. And I grew up in Wyoming, and most of our gatherings are very casual, and I continue to have that here. I like to have a pretty table, but I don't do assigned seats. There's a lot of laughter. Oftentimes we'll do the buffet line up here so that people can take their plates and serve themselves here and get up and enjoy that. There's a lot of conversation that happens around this table. Sometimes we will drop in a topic. In fact, I've had a dinner party where I asked everyone to bring an unpopular opinion about something, and then we will discuss all of those things. But typically in our crew, there's not much silence at any table, so it doesn't have to be too formal. We like to just gather around, and then sometimes then we'll head over here into this room, which is a little bit more of a formal seating room, but nothing is too formal here. This is where I showcase a few things that I care about. Peter and I met on an airplane. We haven't really talked about that too much. It was in 1997, and he lived in England. I lived here. Who would have thought it was ever going to work? Thankfully it did. And this is a picture from our first date in New Orleans in 1997. And back then, because we didn't have phones and the cloud, we don't have that many pictures of ourselves, but that one is special. This room is so great for a few reasons. I typically tend to read here in the late afternoon before dinner. It's also a great place to take a nap if you are ever going to do that. We do a lot of puzzles, and I love Liberty puzzles and artifact puzzles. These are ones with wooden pieces, and if you haven't seen these, I highly recommend them. So this would be the cover, okay? And then you have these big wooden pieces that are very colorful, and you'll get a piece like this. And they're really fun to work with. Here's a cat. And we find it's a great way to bond. The only difficult thing is going to bed and putting it away, and also not getting a crook in your neck from these. But typically, we do a lot of puzzles around here, and Liberty puzzles are special. They're also expensive. So what I've done is started a tradition here in Bayhead. When I finish one, I pass it on to somebody else, and then they all rotate around. So that's kind of fun. This is a special piece for me that comes from Seville, and there's a couple of others that I'll show you. I just fell in love with this artist. He takes classical paintings and then makes a cartoon out of them. And I love that. The fireplace here is a gas fireplace, which is really good. And here you have Peter's prized possession, all of this sea glass that he's found on the beach. I've contributed like 5 pieces, but he finds a lot more in the mornings when he takes Percy to his walks. I've mentioned Lauren Fritz. She gave a gift to me of organizing my bookshelves for me here. So there's just a lot of love and heart here for me that might not be something that a guest would immediately recognize unless they knew me fairly well. So for example, let me just give you an example. You have this picture here with the president. This was in January of 2009, just as he was about to leave office. And Peter had mentioned to me, I won't see him again as president. And I mentioned that to 43, and he said, let's bring him in. So this was the last picture of all of them together. Do a little, I don't really talk about it. I do a little ballroom dancing, and I got 3rd place at a recent competition. So I have that there. We won't talk about that too much more. Some vintage pins that Lauren Fritz found for me, the Bush books here, a little card from the president for Peter. My friend Ingrid gave us this globe, I don't know how it works, but it constantly is moving. And there is some reason in terms of gravity that all works with the movement of the earth, and I kind of enjoy that. This is a special book. This is, let me pull this. Well, these are special. This is a book called The Children's Everything Within. Look at this. And Peter talked about this book that when he was a kid in England, this book was kind of like the encyclopedia that everyone had, and it would tell you all sorts of things about sports, the Bible, literature, myths and legends, and we found a copy for him on eBay. It's pretty precious. This is a book about books, of course, you know I like that. The reason I wanted to grab this, when I was a little kid, I had an illustrated Bible, and I've talked about it several times on The Five. My parents divorced, and I don't know where that book ended up. I don't think I have it in my possession anymore. It could be somewhere, but I basically have lost track of it. And I mentioned this on The Five. And do you know that somebody who watches, who was a bus driver in Staten Island, sent this to me and said, I think this is the book that you were talking about. And it was. And I think it's so special that I have it now, and I had that connection from when I was a kid to coming on The Five, and somebody who was willing to give me their children's Bible. So I have these things here as a special little gift. This is a piece of art that came with the house when we bought it, and this wood paneling is original to the house before Hurricane Sandy, but they were able to treat it and save this wall. So we've left it like this, and I quite like it. It kind of reminds me of Colorado and Wyoming, where I have roots, and a little bit beachy as well. Well, as promised, Percy is making an appearance. Hi, Percy. How you doing? Okay, we can show them a trick maybe. One thing that Barbara Fritz found was this vintage rattan light. And we have gone through many versions, but it has lots of different settings. So it depends on what the day is like and how bright it is outside, how much reading light I need. There's also, this is a cute little thing. I don't have a lot of antiques, but this was given to Peter for Christmas from a good friend of ours who owns the bookshop in town. So here we go. Ready one more time? These are old-fashioned toys. You know, Laura Bush was once asked this question in an interview that I helped staff for her. And she said that what she thought made the White House a home for herself and the president and their daughters was that they had pets. And I don't know if you remember Barney and Miss Beasley, and they had a cat. I think the cat's name was India. And pets can make a house a home. And for us, our dogs have been very important in our life. When Peter and I first met and we lived in England, we had a dog named Henry, and he came to America. He lived in California, rode all the way across the country. He was famous in Washington, D.C., and he even got to live in New York for a few months before he passed. And then we got Jasper, and after he passed away, we got Percy. And in our entire marriage, which is about 26 or 27 years now, we've only been without a dog for about 18 weeks total. So for us, the dog really helps make a house a home. I believe that this is my husband's 44th address in his life. And you wonder, how is that possible? Well, his dad was in the Royal Air Force, and they moved around a lot. And then he was an international businessman, so he lived in a few different places. And we also moved a lot because of opportunity and my jobs that had changed. And it was during COVID that Peter said, this is where I want to be. And so that's how we ended up in Bayhead, New Jersey. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would become a Jersey girl. That was the farthest thing from my mind. I was born in Wyoming. Both of my parents grew up in Wyoming. My mom with a small business type family in Rawlins, and my dad on a ranch that my great-grandparents founded in the late 1800s. And I was 2 years old when we moved to Denver, and I can ride a horse very well. I love the mountains. I love the seasons. I love country western music, all of the things Western in my life. But When I was 22 years old, I'd finished graduate school. I came back to Colorado, not sure what I was going to do, trying to find a job in local media. My goal at the time was to be a main anchor on a great station, sort of in the southwest part of the United States. I speak fluent Spanish. I wanted to utilize it. And I got a job offer in Washington, D.C., answering phones for a congressman. And I thought, if I do that, I'll never get a chance to work in television. Well, that ended up not being true. But the whole reason that I am here today, welcoming you into my home in Bayhead, New Jersey, is because I took this circuitous route to get to doing national television. And that was through Washington, D.C., working on Capitol Hill, working then after 9/11 back at the Justice Department and then at the White House. And ultimately then after that is how I got to New York to work with Fox News. Outdoor space that we did not have a couple of years ago. Let me show you. So right here where these columns are, this is where the porch ended. There was a little deck upstairs, but this was it. We had a dining table out here, but there was no shade. We tried umbrellas, but they would blow over. It just wasn't enough. So we decided to extend that deck and provide shade for this area. So we have another place for everybody to gather when it's warm enough to be outside. So we spend a lot of time out here. This is a sideboard table that we use for the buffet. And also, you know, a dog toy here and there for Percy. These chairs are nice and thick, cozy, and I like, again, the blue accents. This used to have a waterfront view, but after Hurricane Sandy, they built up the dune in order to protect the houses. So this is what we look at. The ocean's just over there. This is something that we had at a house in South Carolina. We had a home in Palmetto Bluff for a while, and there was a porch swing. And so I would sit on that. In the summertime, I sat with my dog, Jasper, and I wrote, and the good news is, on that porch swing. Over here, we have an awning that can come out to provide more shade, and a little fireplace area here. Just yet another place to sit and a deck up there. This is something that Barbara Fritz found. It was a vintage bar, and she had it at another house. And I said, wait, I love that. So now it's over here. We have these little cups, Bayhead or nowhere. And right now it's just water, but we could put lots of other things in there if you wanted. This house was built many, many years ago, and it's gone through 2 hurricanes. Hurricane Sandy that took place in 2012 really wiped out this floor, so everything had to be redone. We bought it, and the kitchen, after about 12 years, needed another redo, so we did that. And Barbara Fritz, who is the decorator, helped design it. It's very clean and very white. It doesn't always look this perfect. I believe all the brass knobs are from Restoration Hardware. She did a quartz countertop, which is something that is great. One of the things I actually like about this is that I do like things to be clean and neat, and I was concerned about having white cabinets. The nice thing is about the finish of these is that they wipe off very nicely. So even if I see something, I can wipe it quickly and it's gone. That is something that we didn't have in the other house, but I love. The light fixtures here are some of my favorite things. I think they're dramatic and big and fun. Of course, the breakfast bar, which also becomes the laptop bar and the dinner bar, anything you want to do here at this bar. This is me being very brave, showing you what's inside my fridge. So here we go. Pretty typical. We don't have children, so we don't have a lot of like kid things, but you know, yogurts and all the different kinds of milks, egg whites, you got to have those. Some berries for your antioxidants. And the most important thing, farmer's dog for Percy. Yeah, he's fancy like that. This is one of the big features of the house, and it's repeated outside, and it's a spiral staircase that gives it, I would say, kind of a nautical feel. That's how I feel about it. And when I first walked in the house when we were going to buy it, it's just a showstopper, and this is something that I really wanted. We also, because we entertain a lot, we wanted some place where we could have a little bit of a bar area. So there's lots of places to sit in the house, and I love a swivel chair. I love these, and we added this bar. So this is a chance for us to showcase a couple of things that we love. In fact, this here, this Weber Ranch vodka, is a friend of ours. He helped take Patron Public, the tequila. Now they have an agave vodka, so we try to feature that. And a lot of this stemware is things that Barbara found. My drink of choice is actually pretty simple: vodka soda with a lime. We do have a lot of country music fans that come to the house, and so of course they like the whiskey, and I've got a Redneck Riviera back here. If you guys know John Rich, Big and Rich, that's his whiskey back there. If you know Lawrence Jones, I have tequila here for when he comes to visit. Lawrence Jones, he's a Fox and Friends co-host, and also he likes this tequila. And then somebody made this for Peter for his birthday, something special. I'm not a big tequila fan, but I have friends that are, so we make sure that they have something special here. This is interesting. A good friend of mine, she went on the pilgrimage in Spain, and she printed this for me because she said she heard me say this, and she loved it. It says, "Traveling is a reminder of how insignificant you are, but God thinks you're significant." And she loved that, and so she made that for me, which is really nice. This is kind of special to me. I have an assistant. I had an assistant named Caroline. She's now had a baby. And we'll show you this bedroom, but this is a scene of a sunrise in July. And she asked an artist to paint it. And so this is a watercolor, but this is the sunrise that we see in the summertime. We have lots of great books, lots of decorating books. This one's a lovely book about all the things that you can see along the sea. Here's my new one. Here's Peter and myself visiting the Bush Center in Dallas. So we try to bring all of the different parts of our life together. As I mentioned, Tony Snow, the press secretary, often had me fill in for him. And there was a 2-week period when I needed to do so. And I had always been very happy being behind the scenes. But there was nobody else to brief the press. I was it. So I am 5'1" on my best day, and he was 6'5". And they had made the podium for him. And when I went to do the briefing, I was nervous about what I was going to say. Was I going to make the president proud? Was I going to screw up? Was I going to start a war? All of those things. I got through it. It was great. The first week was fine. I had been asked, did I want them to make me a new podium? I said, no, that's such a waste of taxpayer dollars. I'll just stand on an apple box at Tony Snow's podium and it'll be fine. So the week goes by, it goes great. But that Friday night, my young assistant press secretary says, "Ma'am, I think they should make you a new podium for next week." And I said, "Oh, there's no need, it's fine. Tony's podium works well." And they said, "Actually, NBC News showed us the camera shot from the back of the room. And when you're at Tony Snow's podium, the seal above your head does not say the White House, it says the White Ho." For a week. And I'll never forget that cameraman from NBC News, Rodney. And he was looking out for me, and he said, "We have to fix this." Now, this is before Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and all the rest. Thank goodness. And let me show you into what I guess is the family room. There's lots of different places to sit, but this is a place where if we are going to watch a movie, we would do that. I like the blue couch. Again, we have kind of a nautical feel, but then these pops of pink that I really, really love. Barbara knew that I love backgammon. My dad would play with my sister and me for hours, and whoever beat that person played the next one. So this is a set that she got for us, and I like to have it out here and not away so that we are more likely to sit and talk and play a game rather than just watching TV or being on our screens. This is pretty fun. Little no one likes a shady beach. Like to have a little bit of fun where we can. This is actually pretty special to me. I had a dog named Jasper. There's been 3 dogs: Henry, Jasper, Percy. Jasper was the middle dog. He was probably the most famous. He was on Fox a lot. He loved to be on TV, would look straight into the camera. And this painting was commissioned by a friend of mine, a really well-known country music artist and songwriter named Amy Mayo. She wrote the song Amazed, in case you want to look that up. And her uncle painted this. And what I love about this is he has a gallery in Nashville. And he didn't know who Jasper was. He just painted this King Jasper. He was hanging it in his gallery, and people came in and they said, "Oh, you know America's dog, Jasper?" And he said, "Who is this dog?" Well, that's who he is. And Kelly Harwood is now a good friend of mine as well. So that's a special piece. I keep this book out. We read a lot. I love books. Joseph Mitchell has this book, Up in the Old Hotel. Great stories about New York. And I am not a native New Yorker. It's an adopted city, but I love it. And Charlie Hurt of Fox News gave this to me, and I love it very much. I also was gifted this painting here of Jasper. This was given to me by a local news anchor in Syracuse. And he appreciated a favor that I did for him, so he had that commission for me. We really do need warmth in this room in the winter, so the fireplace is really important for us to get some heat moving in here. For some reason, it's not that warm in here. This is special. So the 5, one time we went to Nashville with John Rich, and we wrote a song called Shut Up About Politics, and it went to #1 in the world, and it took the country music world by storm. You can see it on Spotify. This is Dana, we did it. #1. Love ya, John Rich. I do not know how to play the guitar, but thankfully my husband does. And anybody else who comes by, if they want to give it a shot, we let them do that. Peter has quite a vinyl collection. Here we go. My sister does a lot of paint by number. Barbara has me hide these, but I like them. This was Peter on his Harley that has a sidecar, and he dressed up as Batman. Jasper was Robin. It was for a contest at a parade in South Carolina, and we won first place. So I was pretty proud of that. Here's just, again, like these bookshelves that are so important to us. This was Jasper. This is my mom here. I have pictures of President Bush here. A lot of my Fox friends have written books, and so I include them where I can. Of course, I remember getting this. This was a special gift from Jeannie Mamo, who was a good friend of mine, and gave this to me. She and I worked at the White House together. And you can see more. Savannah Guthrie and I worked together at the White House. Back in the day, of course, she's on the Today Show now. So just a chance for me to have a lot of books. I try to move books along so that I don't have too many, but it's hard because I keep buying them wherever I can. This is one of my favorite photographs of a really fun time. I've mentioned Lauren Fritz. She is my good friend from Fox News, and her mother is the interior designer of this house. This is one of the cowboys. I don't actually know what he calls himself, in Spain, and he is an incredible horseman, and we got to have a private tour with him, and that was just a great moment. Fox News colleagues, I'll never forget this. This was after COVID. This is when Brett Baer, Martha McCallum, Bill Hemmer, and the president of Fox News, Jay Wallace, we were all together celebrating post-COVID, getting through that election, and there we had that. We inherited this pool table. I'm not the best player, but I wanted to keep this because it is a focal point for when we gather people around and just to, shoot the balls around a little bit. I really don't know how to play. I'm not great at it, but I like to watch and comment. This here is a painting that was commissioned in the Jersey Shore. She used to do a lot of these, but she had never, ever painted a dog in a picture before. So this was her first one, and that was Jasper. He loved fetching sticks in the ocean. This is a little bit special. This is what our house looks like from the outside. And that's an old antique vintage picture that somebody found at an antique store around town, and they painted it on this shell. So I keep that as a little keepsake, indeed. I mentioned that my husband has had 44 homes. This is a place called Ely in Scotland. That is one of the places where he lived. There is an Air Force base, a Royal Air Force base, and that is nearby that water. So we have that as a special little homage to that. And then years ago, Greg Gutfeld sold to Peter his Metropolitan, Nash Metropolitan. It's in the garage now, but this was a painting that was commissioned of that little car that's really fun. Interestingly enough, these were the first cars ever marketed to women. They're small, they're cute, and they're fun. There's no seatbelts though, so I don't like to go in too often. In January of 2009, I left the day that President Bush went home to Texas, and I went on a trip. My husband and I spent a month in Africa, in South Africa in particular. We did 2 weeks of volunteer work and 2 weeks of safari and learning more about the country. And I loved it. But when I came back, I needed to get to work. And really one of the only things I truly wanted to do was to have some sort of a presence on cable television. And my hope was it would be Fox, but I wasn't sure if that would work out. But I had a champion and a secret weapon, and that was Sean Hannity. And he was the one who said, I think she's got something special. Let me try. Now, please don't go back and look for any of those early tapes. They have to be terrible. But he invited me every week to come up and to be on his show with Stuart Varney, who now is one of our main anchors at Fox Business and a wonderful guy. Also British like my husband, and I got along very well with him. I had a variety of jobs. I was working in PR. I was appointed to the Broadcasting Board of Governors under President Obama as one of the Republican nominees to that position. I had a Minute Mentoring organization that I had started. I was giving a lot of speeches. I was on doing charity work. And when you leave a White House, you truly believe that the last call you got is the last call you will ever get. That obviously turned out not to be true. But in all of those things that I did, the only thing that I loved the most, that I would drop everything for, was if they asked me to be a guest on any of the Fox programs. So I would do Fox and Friends. I would do daytime programming. I'd go up for Hannity, or maybe even get the chance to be on that time, the O'Reilly Factor. Bret Baier and I knew each other from the White House days when he covered President Bush. And what really changed things was in July of 2011, I was just getting home from Africa, and I was at Dulles Airport at baggage claim waiting for my suitcase, and I get a call, and it's from Fox. And would you be willing to come up for about 5 weeks this summer, just for a temporary program? It's going to be 5 people sitting around a table for 1 hour at 5 o'clock, and it's just for 5 weeks. And I thought, wow, ugh, in the summer, yuck, there's no place worse than the middle of Manhattan in the summertime. And I called Peter, and he said, congratulations. This is what you've always wanted. And 14 years later, we are still doing that show. And Greg Gutfeld and I are the two still original people that started it together. He and I didn't know each other. We are great friends, but we didn't know each other really. And the only reason we sit next to each other on the 5 is because we are the 2 shortest people at Fox, and the lighting worked well for us to be there together. From there, I also did other programs as a guest. But then in October of 2017, I started the Daily Briefing with Dana Perino. And then in 2020, that all changed as well. And I had an opportunity to be with Bill Hemmer doing America's Newsroom, which is one of the bedrock news programs of Fox. So anchoring that with him from 9 to 11 a.m. and then still doing the 5 from 5 to 6. And then there was one other assignment that I loved, and that was the election coverage team. I love this team. I think that we are the best at it. We have so much fun, and we're also the most knowledgeable. We have great sources, and it has been a wild ride, as everybody can imagine. And then in addition to that, Fox has given me the opportunity to do something I always wanted to do. There's a book in my basement, this little cloth-covered book from first grade. And I remember the assignment was you had to write, what did you want to be when you grew up? And I wrote, an author. Fox has been able to help me make that dream come true. I have 4 books under my belt, and then I have a brand new one. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's a little gem. It's called I Wish Someone Had Told Me the best advice for building a great career and a meaningful life. And how about Percy and I take you upstairs to show you a couple of more rooms? So this is a hallway leading into one of my favorite guest rooms. This painting comes from the same artist in Sevilla, and I love the colors. And then Lauren Fritz, she's quite the artist. She painted this as well, and it really goes with this room here. And welcome to this little guest bedroom. It's my sister's favorite place to stay, my mom's too. I have a little bit of a green theme going in here. So this is a nice chair, a little bamboo seat for your feet. This is a piece of art that I've had for years. When I lived on Capitol Hill and I had finally a little extra money, I bought this print from one of the artisans there at Eastern Market, and I've kept it. It reminds me of all those fun times I had in Washington, D.C. My memories there from Capitol Hill are very fond, and it also gave me a great tie-in to the greens of this room. And the special thing about this guest bedroom is that when you come out, you have the ocean view, and the staircase, we kept the spiral theme, and the artisans who did that were quite good at their jobs, of course. And then more places to sit, the blues and the pinks, and one of the favorite features, the American flag. And Percy likes to sit up here and take in the air, and we love a sunrise, and sometimes we move the furniture and have a little yoga party out here, which is quite fun to do. And now we will go up to my special little spot. Again, another spiral staircase. Come on up. And this is what we call the perch, and it's kind of my room. People are allowed up here, but really it is my space. Some fun pictures of me and Jasper, Peter and I with Percy, and a little beach theme. I decided to get an old-fashioned alarm clock, so I have that here and keeps me on task. This is where I do a lot of my writing. This is a vintage desk that Barbara Fritz found, and she got me this lovely mat that is a beach scene. So I keep that here because sometimes I'm trapped up here writing. And a nice little Lily Pulitzer notebook. It's quite nautical. The wallpaper is quadrille. I love it. It feels like spring and health all year round. It's one of my favorite spots. Again, also vintage bookshelf with some neat things like, for example, a little White House themed pen. This pen was made from wood of the flooring that they had to replace, and so they made these for us. A good friend of mine gave me this candle, and I love it. I don't burn it because I'm afraid of not having this candle, but I probably should. But it's called The First Draft, which I think is brilliant. This is actually my favorite cartoon. Oh my gosh. So I was the White House press secretary, and sometimes you can get a little frustrated with reporters. This says, guy at the podium to a crowd, hey you. No, not you. The guy next to you. Nope, farther. No, not him. You. Yeah, you? Yeah. F you. My favorite. Bayhead has a lake, and so we were there. I went to Rwanda not too long ago and visited a friend's charity, and we also got to go and visit gorillas. These were some really wonderful young people doing some traditional dances, welcoming us to that beautiful spot. You know, Africa is important to me. This area is where I do all my writing, and I sit and I look out at the ocean, and I have this quiet space. It's usually very silent up here, which I need silence in order to work. And then there's some workout equipment here to make sure I stay on task. Pilates, I love. The Wanda chair is a great investment. It will last you forever. And then I have a little spot to go and sit outside here. Do some yoga sometimes by myself. But it's really lovely. And if you look up this way, you can see all the way to Point Pleasant Beach. one of the best things about working at a White House, and the best way not to get a big head about it, is to share it with other people. And we had just been to Africa on a presidential trip, and I was very moved. And to this day, my husband and I volunteer and are supportive of a couple of different key charities that we think do a great job in Africa. But it all started because of my access to it through President Bush. On my way home from that trip, I read a book by a reporter, Helene Cooper. She writes for the New York Times to this day. And she had grown up in Liberia. That's one of the countries that we visited when we were there. And America has a very special relationship and a responsibility for Liberia. Many freed Black slaves had returned to Liberia in order to help get that country going. It was the first democracy in Africa. It had gone through a lot of civil war. And Helene was a young girl when that civil war broke out. And she writes this beautiful book, and I read it. I was very moved. At the end of the book, it turns out that her sister was going to be coming to the United States for a visit, a sister that she had left behind in Africa, somebody who had been adopted into the family. I was very moved by this story, and I sent Helene a note, and she writes back saying, guess what? My sister's coming next week. And so later that day, I saw President Bush, and I said, Mr. President, I just talked to Helene, and this book is so good, I think you'd really like it. And by the way, her sister is going to be in Washington next week. Is that amazing? And he said, should we invite her to the Oval Office? I said, I think we should. And that next week she got to come, and it was such a moving moment. I can see it all in my mind right now. And there's several little key moments like that are not necessarily profound, and it wasn't like meeting any world leader, but to me, meeting that woman who was able to come see her sister, to know that the President of the United States and the taxpayers of the country were willing to try to help them. It was very moving, and we did that a lot. I have a friend I worked with at the White House who had a great description, because I think a lot of people see it as a big mysterious place, and in a way it is. It should have some intrigue. And you can see shows like The West Wing or Veep, and truly a lot of them do a pretty good job of things. But I think people would be surprised at how many times things happen by chance. The White House is not like the Wizard of Oz and everything is behind the curtain. Some things just happen and there's no conspiracy to it. And I have a very good friend who used to work for Condoleezza Rice, and he told me, the longer I work in government, the more convinced I am that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Like, it's very hard to get coordination anyway, let alone big conspiracies. One of the things I say to young women is, if you are an educated young woman in America, most of the people in the world would rather trade places with you. And you have to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if I try? And one of the things I've learned is just how quickly time flies. And I want to buy everyone's extra minutes so that I can have more time in the day. But it's the most bipartisan thing in the world. We all get the same amount of time in a day. And so I'm inspired by wanting to do my very best so that I can achieve all of the aspirations. I was White House press secretary at a very young age, and that time it went by very quickly. And now I have this opportunity to provide my thoughts and entertain millions of people every single day, and then to also reach others, especially younger people, when it comes to the self-help and advice books and mentoring books that I've been doing. And also just to have some fun and some joy in life. That's really what I think this house has given to me, and it's a real blessing.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.